Hey, if you're a landlord in Colorado, I'm glad you are watching because the Colorado legislature has recently passed a bill that's going to greatly impact landlords in a number of different aspects. But one important small point we need to be aware of is as it relates to late fees. Now, if I asked you the question, hey, can landlords charge late fees? You'd probably say, well, of course, landlords can charge late fees. They can do whatever they want, can't they? And we can still charge late fees, but in a much greatly more regulated and reduced fashion. Now, this all comes under SB 21-173. That's the House bill, the Senate bill that passed. It's called Concerning Rights Related to Residential Rental Agreements. Now, this is not a full diagnosis of this bill. It is a long bill. We will link to it in this video. If you want to go in and read it in its entirety, feel free to do so. It is a long bill. There's a lot of different aspects. It jumps from different parts of rental agreements to different rules that landlords has to follow. We will do a series of videos outlining specific important things that we believe you as a landlord or a tenant need to be aware of in Colorado. So this is not meant to be a full breakdown of even the late fee portion. I'm just hitting a few highlights of what that entails so you don't get yourself in trouble as a landlord, and as a tenant you can make sure your landlord's following the current rules. So here is one question that often comes up. Is there a cap on late fees? Or can I just set them? Can I, as the landlord, make it whatever I want to be? Can I say, hey, if you're a day late, you have to pay me a $1,000 late fee? Now, in the past, I could write that into my lease agreement. However, Colorado judges would not enforce things that were not reasonable. That was the legal term, reasonable. Colorado judges have always ruled that about 10% of a tenant's rent is a reasonable late fee. Anything over that, they would not allow. So as a landlord, I could legally say, I'm charging you a $1,000 late fee, Mr. Tenant. And if I went in front of a judge, the judge would politely laugh and throw me out and say, no, that's not reasonable. I'm not going to let you charge more than 10%. That's how it was in the past. The new cap on late fees is this. It says this: the late fee may not exceed the greater of either 5% of the rent or $50. May not exceed the greater of 5% of the rent or $50. So pretend you have a rental property that's renting for $1,000 a month, and you're trying to update your lease agreement. How much of a late fee can you charge the tenant if they do not pay on time under the new rule? Well, you could either charge them 5%, 5% of $1,000 is $50, or you could charge them $50, the greater. So you'd say, okay, so $1,000 is the threshold. If you have a property that rents for under $1,000 a month, you may want to set, if you're trying to get the most you can in a late fee, set your late fee at $50, because anything under $1,000 a month is going to be less than $50. If you have a property that's renting for $2,000 a month, what late fee can you charge? Well, 5% of $2,000 would be $100. You can charge the greater of $100, which is 5%, or the $50. So you probably want to put in the 5%. So that's the new rule on how much of a late fee landlords can charge. Now, there's some other important distinctions on this as well, so don't fall asleep yet. Because here's the other big thing, and that is simply the question, well, when can I charge this late fee? Because under the old law, it was simply governed by the lease. The lease could say, hey, the rent's, and this is what most leases in Colorado said, by the way, the rent's due on the 3rd, you have a grace period till the rent's due on the 1st, you have a grace period till the 3rd, and if you don't pay by the 3rd, Mr. Tenant, you're going to be imposed a late fee after the 3rd. So there's like a grace period there in the front. Well, the legislature in this bill said, you know what? That's not enough time. That's not enough time. So we are going to make it a state law that late fees may not be charged until after the rent is 7 days late. A late fee may not be charged until after the rent is 7 days late. In other words, tenants have a built-in 7-day grace period now. And you cannot charge the late fee until 7 days past the due date. So here's the challenge. If in your current lease agreement, landlords, you say rent's due on the 1st, but it's not late until the 3rd, and a late fee is charged because you're late on the 3rd, well, now the new law says, you can't charge that late fee until 7 days after it's late. And your old lease says it's not late until the 3rd, so you can't charge it until the 11th. So one unintended consequence of this well-meaning bill is that landlords are now going to not give tenants a grace period because they have to wait 7 days anyway. So they're going to say, hey, your rent's due and payable on the 1st, and it is late after the 1st. There's no late fee charged yet, but it's late on the 2nd, it's late on the 3rd, it's late on the 4th. I still can't charge you a late fee until the 8th now, because it's due on the 1st, 7 days after the 1st. So it's not as straightforward as it seems. It's kind of convoluted. A couple other important things to be aware of with this bill as it relates to late fees. Number one, landlords, you must first apply any tenant payments to rents due, then you apply the balance to late fees. So in the past, if a landlord wanted to, if they wanted to kind of be sneaky, they could say, you know what, we're going to take this payment you made, Mr. Tenant, and you owe me a late fee, so I'm going to apply the first $50 of this payment to the late fee, the rest goes to rent, and you're outstanding in your rent. But new bill says, no. All the payment has to first go to the rent. Then, if there's anything left, you can apply it to the late fee. Now, why is that important? Well, because of this other part of the bill. It says this: landlords may not evict tenants for non-payment of late fees. Ooh, that's a big deal. In other words, if your rent is $1,000, tenant doesn't pay, and the 8th day of the month comes and goes. So now you charge them a $50 late fee. They owe $1,050, and they only pay you $1,000. And they say, nope, I'm only giving you $1,000. You have to apply that rent, $1,000 to the rent, and now on their ledger they owe you $50, and they do it again the next month. They do it again the next month, and the next month. And pretty soon you're looking at $500 in late fees. The bill says, you know what? I understand that they owe you $500 in late fee, Mr. Landlord, but guess what? You can't evict him for that. You may not. It is illegal to evict a tenant for non-payment of late fees alone. So this is an interesting bill. We'll see how this plays out. It's already having some strange unintended consequences that really are not helping tenants in the long run. Now, here's another important thing. This bill goes into effect October 1st of 2021. That does not give landlords much time to change their lease agreements, to change their policies, to change their accounting, to ensure that as of October 1, 2021, landlords, you do not charge your tenants more than the greater of 5% or $50 in rent, because there are penalties for doing so. Now, again, I'm not going into the details of the law. Read the bill. If you've got questions, call our office. Our entire team sat down for many, many hours, and we read through this bill line by line by line. We talked to our attorneys. We know this thing much more than we would like to know this thing inside and out. It's messy, but we're aware of it. So if you have questions, if we can be of assistance, please consider us a resource at Grace Property Management. If you're one of our current clients, don't worry. We've got all this under control. We will put these things in place to protect you, your tenant, and your property. But if you're not, reach out. We'll be happy to assist if we can.